Photoshop has an easy-to-use feature that enables you to manipulate the perspective of an image. In this example, we're going to see how to use perspective warp in order to change the perspective of the building. Now, unfortunately, perspective warp doesn't support smart objects. So if I don't want to make changes to the background, I'll use the keyboard shortcut Command-J on Mac or Control-J on Windows in order to duplicate it. We can rename this one to warp. Then under the Edit menu, I'll choose Perspective Warp. I need to click anywhere in my image and drag out the initial plane and then make adjustments to that plane. In this case, I'll move the lower left anchor point up to match the perspective of the building, and then I'll move the anchor point in the upper left in order to match the perspective. Now, this is quite an old building, so I'm not exactly sure that the perspective is going to be exactly correct. But let's go ahead and bring it down to about there. So now I need to drag out the second plane. I'll click and drag, and as I position my cursor close to the first plane, it will highlight and show me that those two warps would then become connected. So when I release the cursor, they do, and now we can modify this plane. So I'll bring this down and then bring the bottom one up. Now, if I just drag on this center line and I drag it out, I can actually freely distort this. So I don't actually want to do that. I'll use Command-Z instead. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key and then drag it. And that way it'll maintain the perspective that I've already drawn. When I'm finished with the layout, I can then switch over to Warp. And I can toggle between these two by either tapping the W key or by tapping the L key for layout. So I'll tap W, and now I'm back in Warp. There's some icons here. If I just wanted to straighten the horizontal lines or the vertical lines in my image, I can. But while I think that's kind of a cool effect, it's not exactly what I'm after. I could also try straightening them both. But in this case, I'm just going to click on the Reset option. Now I'm still in Warp, so now I can click on any of the pins and just freely drag it in order to change the perspective. If I want to constrain a line to be vertical or horizontal, I can hold down the Shift key. When I position my cursor over the line, it highlights it in yellow, and I'll click in order to select that, but then I'll deselect the Shift key, click on one of the points, and then we can see that it will keep that line vertical as I change the perspective. So in this case, I'm just going to make that one change and maybe raise these up here. And when I'm finished, I can click the check mark in order to apply that perspective warp. If I toggle the visibility of the warp layer, we can see there's after and there's before. One shortcut that I forgot to mention while we were in perspective warp is that you can use the arrow keys in order to just nudge any of the selected pins, and you can add the Shift key to nudge in larger increments. So there you are, an easy way to warp the perspective of an image in Photoshop, which can also be incredibly useful when compositing multiple images together in the same photograph.